Well, welcome back to Return to Yehovah. Obviously, I'm on the road, but sometimes it's easier. I get these thoughts going through my head, and it's a little bit easier to, just while I'm killing time driving, to talk to you guys, almost as if you're sitting next to me in the car. Although I'm talking a little bit louder, so it comes across on the microphone, Anyhow, I was thinking about the concept of sanctification, being sanctified or whatever. And I'm mainly thinking of how we look at it in the New Testament way of thinking or whatever. That's one of those words I used to think, kind of like holy or holiness. I used to think, how in the world can I be holy? I mean, I remember a book, honestly, I don't remember the name of the guy that wrote it, but many of you out there have probably read it or know of it. It was called The Pursuit of Holiness. And basically, this man did I'm sure it was a man, did a study of holiness from the Bible. I don't know how in-depth it was, but I know as I read it, the concept came across, but I sure felt like I can't get there. And I was reminded of Paul, who said in, I think, Romans, how, oh, miserable man that I am, or wretched man, or whatever, because he talked about how what I want to do, I don't, and the things I know I should do, I don't, or my flesh doesn't let me, or whatever. And this is Paul, who had been a believer in Yeshua as the Messiah for probably 20 years at that point. Now, honestly, I took that from Messianic Rabbi Greg Hirschberg, who's the one that knew the dates, of about what era that was when Paul said it. So, I don't know for sure how long Paul had been a believer at that point, but this rabbi mentioned that in something I saw recently. So, anyhow, so today I'm thinking about, I have a different perspective on what the Bible calls sanctification or being holy, because if you haven't understood by now on this channel, most of what I talk about, or where the things where they come from, are rooted in my understanding of the Torah, or the law of God, that I've been reading and learning for the last about 13 years, give or take. It's almost exactly 13. Anyhow, once you start understanding what the Torah, or the books of the law, or whatever you want to call it, the Pentateuch, whatever, when you start understanding what they say, or what it says in there, and how God defines holy, or holiness, or being sanctified, they're similar, maybe not exact, but it's the idea. Holy means to be set apart. Like God calls the Sabbath a set apart day, which means to him, that would mean it's holy. It is something wonderful, beautiful, whatever that you want to call it, but it is special. Maybe that's how we would define it in modern lingo or whatever. I'm sure, honestly, special doesn't do it justice, but when God calls something set apart, I'm trying to think how it was described to me once. Somebody used to talk about how if you had company coming over for a big dinner, a big meal, celebrating something really big, and instead of just using the everyday dishes, you went and got your grandma's expensive china from 100 years before that had been passed down through the generations. So this special set apart china, or I should say the china, the dishes were set aside or set apart for special occasions. You know what I mean? So just trying to give an idea. But what really, in layman's terms, and for regular people like us to understand, when the Bible talks about being set apart or holy unto God, it ultimately, you can't do that or be that without God's commandments. Now, the commandments teach us how we should live, or how we should honor God or love God, but they also teach us how we should love our neighbor, our fellow man, and how to interact with people, and how not to treat people, and how to treat them properly. But anyhow, God's law is His instructions, and if we don't care to follow those, we're not going to ever be set apart or holy. Now, throw out the idea of holy as being like some awesome man or woman of God that just, practically floats above the ground, and their light, or their face glows when they talk to you, and they have wonderful words of wisdom or whatever. I'm not talking about that, and I'm not talking about an awesome preacher or like a Mother Teresa. I mean, she had done some wonderful things, helping the poor and all that stuff, and yes. Now, I'm not saying she wasn't holy. I don't know her. I don't know anything about her, really. But that's not what I'm talking about. It's not necessarily what a lot of us picture as holy, okay? Think of some of the movies where Moses came down the mountain after getting the 10 Commandments. And granted, it was an awesome experience for anybody. And they said at some point when he was communing with God or whatever, he'd come out of the tabernacle or whatever, and his face would literally shine with the glory of God or whatever, and the people were like, oh my gosh. So it got to be where I guess he would cover his face just because it was, freaking the people out or whatever. But anyhow, I didn't want to go a long thing here, and this is not a hardcore, in-depth teaching, but just something to consider, as I say often. Being holy before God, or set apart to Him, or whatever. God says, be holy, for I am holy. That can only be achieved by keeping His commandments. And obviously, I always have to say the ones that you are able to. And of course, if you're confused about how to keep a commandment, then maybe just wait till you understand it, okay? I can't think of a great example right now, but I guarantee you there are things in the Word, and I'm like, Lord, I don't know how to keep that commandment exactly. But maybe you do your best. Again, I'm just giving some thoughts here. But I originally said it was sanctification. And I think most of us understand that to become sanctified or being sanctified before God is pretty much the same idea. It talks about, again, being made holy. At least that's my understanding at this point. And it's a process. It's not something that happens, okay, I read the Torah one time, I think I understand it, and I am holy now, or I am sanctified now. No, you're progressively growing in your understanding of God and your learning of Him. You're not going to arrive in this lifetime, I'm pretty sure. The Apostle Paul didn't arrive, according to his words, so don't expect to get there, wherever that is in this life. And we're not talking about, being perfectly sinless like Yeshua was. I mean, that's a goal, of course. But to be sinless would be to not violate the Torah as much as we usually do or used to. You know what I mean? I realize this is a foreign concept to a lot of Christians, because you've been told the law is tossed out or was nailed to the cross. And I will talk about this all the time. I may repeat some of the same things over and over. But keeping God's commandments as they're written in the Bible, and as best as you can, is being obedient to God. It's making your best effort to set yourself apart to God. And it's part of the process as the Spirit that's within you. You've got to be a believer in Yeshua first, okay? It's not something you just decide. You go from one day being an unbeliever to starting to keep God's commandments. I mean, that's a good thing in life. I mean, you can be a good person that way, but if you do it without faith in Yeshua or Jesus, it's just going to be working, and you're not going to earn your salvation anyway, okay? I realize this is kind of a disjointed kind of thing, but I'm driving. What do you expect? If you were sitting next to me, you would have stopped and questioned me about something, and we would have maybe gone a different direction. But I'm just trying to say that sanctification, or being holy as the Bible tells us to do, is not... I mean, I don't even know if the church even tries to teach it. They may say it and they may make a lot of words, but I never had a clue what they were, how I could ever get to that point until I started learning the Torah and what's in it. And then I realized God gives us lots of things that He wants us to do or not do. And I realized it's not checking off a list. Okay, I did that, God. I did never do that, but He tells us, these things I want you to do. It's a pattern of life and all that. And if you do those things, you'll realize you're doing works of righteousness, and you are setting yourself apart. You're coming out of the world and doing the things that God wants. Okay? I don't know if this is something you're tracking with, but we need to get this concept. All right? So think on these things. Do some of your own research. And the key is, though, you've got to learn the Torah. And I'm not talking you got to memorize it, but start reading it from Genesis 1:1 all the way through the end of Deuteronomy. Read it and believe it and start learning it and trying to, comprehend what it teaches. But then you just have to believe it. But that is like the path that a believer should take. Once you become a newborn Christian and you put your faith in Yeshua, then what you should be started on is a path to understanding who God is and what He wants you to do in this life. And that is in the Torah. Okay? I'm going to close for now. But I want you to, give some thought to these things and, maybe hash it out. I mean, pray about it or dig into the Word and see if these things are true. All right? Well, Yehovah bless you and keep you. Shalom.